NFC. And before I get ahead of myself, once again, you are watching the Hess Sports Podcast on Diego Warrior on twitch.tv/Diego Warrior 100. Recently, I've been experiencing some some frame drops. So I'm not multi-streaming to my YouTube channel this time. I will be uploading this to my YouTube channel though. Right after this. But if you like it on the YouTube channel, consider leaving a like and subscribing and sharing with your friends. This is a relaunch. This is a relaunch of my podcast that I had about a year ago, before I went off to college, and kind of stopped it because I was really busy. But now that I'm taking the winter term off, I decided it'd be fun to try and start one up again. And so any support helps. If you're watching this on the twitch.tv/Diego100, if you're watching it right now, consider leaving a follow. I'm trying to build this thing up as much as possible. It'll be a slow build, but let's see if we can't try and get that affiliate. So now we're gonna move on to the NFC. To avoid making just so I can get to the Seahawks. We're gonna start with the NFC West, and the NFC West obviously has the Seahawks in it, who finished 12-4, won the division, followed by the Rams, who went 10-6, and then the Cardinals, who went 8-8, and then the 49ers, who went 6-10. The Seahawks, I do not believe in the Seahawks at all this year. Yes, they started out really hot, but yes, they started out really well, but it was still their defense. I was like, I have never trusted their defense ever, and the one thing that I think went wrong, where I think they went wrong, is that they had splat. Russell Wilson was throwing all these deep balls early in the season, and it was like, Russell's cooking because of DK Metcalf, and we all these highlights, and they were really fun to watch. They were, but eventually they didn't really feel like they had much strategy to them. It just kind of looked like, well, we need a chunk play right now. Let's throw it deep to let's force it to Metcalf, and I don't think that's the right strategy, because there were times where I felt just throw a short pass, because we just need a first down, because Russell Wilson's still running around because of the O-line, and Russell Wilson sometimes doesn't have the best game either, and I think the problem with the Seahawks is that they took too long trying to come up with a strategy. Yes, Metcalf was a really good receiver this year, and it was fun watching the deep balls, but when you throw it deep, it's got to have strategy to it. It's got to have a reason for it. It can't just be, throw it deep because he's tall and he catches most of them. It's got to have strategy. There are times when that does need to be the case too, like late in games when you do need a chunk play. But early game, the Seahawks are more of a team that needs to run it. I hope they get back to running the ball a little bit more. I don't think Chris Carson's the best. I like Chris Carson, but I don't think he can. I don't think he's the kind of back that we can really do things with. Yes, he's a good running back, and he's our best running back that we have, but he's not a feature back, as I mentioned before with the Bills. I think the Seahawks, and I hope that this is something that the new offensive coordinator does next year. I hope this is something that our new offensive coordinator this year that we hired this year because they fired Brian Schottenheimer. One of the things I hope that they do is obviously try and fix the O line because he's still taking a lot of sacks and a lot of hits, and then when because Russell Wilson's uncomfortable, he makes bad decisions because he's running around and he's trying to make a play, and it's just it doesn't work. So we need to fix our O line, and I hope that because offensive coordinator comes from the Rams, who head coach is the Sean McVay, who's pretty smart. Hopefully he can bring some of that. Hopefully he can implement a better strategy for going deep with Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. I think they have the pieces to be successful. It's just that there was there just seemed to be no strategy to their offense this year. I liked Jacob Hollister this year. He's a good tight end. I think they should play him more because I don't think they play him enough, and especially now that Greg Olsen decided to retire again, has decided to retire now. I hope that we see Jacob Hollister get more playing time next year. But the other area that I think the Seahawks need to do is work on their defense. Their defense was really bad this year, and I know that was a large part due to injuries. But I think if you're going to have, I think you should try and target a safety, because if you're going to have Jamal Adams, okay? If you're gonna have Jamal Adams as your safety, and Jamal Adams is one of those safeties where he likes to blitz a lot, right? That's what he's used for mainly, right? Not that he can't cover either, but that's more of his game. And I think if you're gonna do that, you need a safety. You need someone back there that can cover the field, because if you put Jamal Adams, who's the safety, and blitz him, as the blitzing safety, that puts a lot of pressure on the back end, because if you don't have a guy that can cover the field, then you're kind of screwed on the back end, and perhaps, and as much as I love the linebacking core, I think this is one of those times where I think perhaps we could use KJ Wright and bring in another piece, and try and make a move for a safety, because as much as I love the tandem, I think we're getting to a point where we're gonna have to make a move there, and if you can keep him there, it'd be great. If you can keep him there, fantastic. But I think the safety position is the area that we should look for, as well as some corners. But as well as some cornerbacks, and then obviously obviously on the offensive line, and then trying to find a feature back for Russell Wilson. That's the problem. And the reason why I feel this way about the Seahawks is that the reason why I say it felt like that their plans really had no strategy behind them. The one game where it really bit them was the New York Giants game, right? It took them way too long to score. They didn't do anything, and because it doesn't feel like you don't really have the O-line to always throw deep. You're kind of hurting yourself, and which is why I think we need to see more of the quick game, more of a West Coast type look. And I think that's what the quarter. I think that's what the guy's going to bring from the Rams, because Sean McVay's a West Coast guy, and I think that'll pay dividends. But I think the but I think the moment that really proves my point is the Giants game, because you know they didn't play well at all. And I know the Giants were kind of playing a little bit better, but they're the Giants, and that's a team, and that's one of the teams where I felt the Seahawks should have blown them out. As injured as the 49ers were, they blew out the Giants. They did what they were supposed to do versus the Giants, but we couldn't, and it was unfortunate. And then the games, and then also the teams, like with good pass rushes, we couldn't hold up like against the Bills. We got blown out there as well, and we just had no answer because there's some times because there are some points in the game plan where like, oh yeah, that's a pretty good game plan, but then there's like, nah, I don't think you should have thrown the deep ball right there, because we're on our side of the field, and we just need to keep moving and get closer. And now it's third down, and now it's fourth down, and now we got a punt, and that just wasn't very fun. That just wasn't good, and the Seahawks were fraudulent. They I didn't really believe in them at all. Even when they were even though they were 6-0 or 5-0 or whatever they started out as, they I didn't have any faith in them, especially since they almost let the Falcons come back on them week 1. The next team in the division is the Rams. They finished second. They went further than the Seahawks in the playoffs because they beat them, because the Seahawks played the Rams in their wild card round. The Rams were a weird team also. There were times where they were the best, where they looked like they were going to go on a roll, and then they lose inexplicably. Because they started out the year by beating Dallas. They started the year beating Dallas, Philadelphia, New York, and Washington. So they pretty much beat. Those are pretty bad teams though this year. And they lost to Buffalo, was a playoff team. They lost to 49ers, which at that time was a playoff team still, but they weren't this year. They beat the Chicago Bears. They started out 5-3 this year before their bye. And the way that I do it is, I think wherever your bye is, I would say that's like the second half of your season starts after the bye week, because it's the time that you reload, and you reevaluate, and then you make changes. So that's why I say the bye week, whenever your bye week is, that's usually when that's like the first half of the season. And before your bye week, I would say, is the first half of the season for you, and then after the bye week is the second half. And they went on a roll of sorts after their bye week because they beat the Seahawks, Tampa Bay, lost to San Francisco, beat Arizona, who was pretty good at the time. They were, and then they beat the Patriots 24-3. But then they lost to the Jets, who won their first. But then they lost to the Jets, and then to Seattle, and then and just barely squeaked out a win versus Arizona. But there are times when it looked like they were going to go on a roll, but then they didn't, and they were just kind of, and they were just kind of, I don't know. It was a weird season for the Rams. Jared Goff. I don't know, man. He's a good quarterback. He has spots where he looks really good, and then he has spots where he looks really bad. You know, um, I don't know what it is, but hopefully they can. Hopefully, hopefully Jared Goff um, tr- can find some consistency. Otherwise, I think they'll start to look elsewhere. Um, but they've got they do got the pieces. They do got the pieces to win. You know, they got Jalen Ramsey at corner. They they still got a really good offense, but it's just but a lot of their success depends on how well Jared Goff plays, and I think most of the time it's I think most of the time it's a good thing, and then most of the time and then other times it's unfortunate. The next team is the Arizona Cardinals, who went 8-8, uh, which is pretty good. You know, I think they were a surprise team to start the year. You know, it was it was year two under or was this year one? This was year you know, and they started off the year beating San Francisco for their first game of the season. Then they beat Washington. They lost two straight to Detroit and Carolina, and then they won three in a row to go into their bye week 5-2, and they looked pretty dominant in those games. They beat they beat the Dallas Cowboys, who were pretty good, but they handled their business in that game. You know they you know you know the Dallas Cowboys were really bad this year, and credit to them for playing for playing for playing like that, because 38-10 they handled their business. But then they started to teeter off a little bit. They went into the bye. They went into their bye 5-2, and then they finished their season uh, 6 or 3-6. So, and I think that's a large part due to their youth. They started out hot, and they haven't quite really figured it out yet. They did make some really good offseason moves. One was because of a bad trade, because DeAndre Hopkins was a really good addition for them. It just he practically fell into their laps. Practically, it was not a good trade for the Houston Texans, and it was really dumb for the it was really dumb for the Texans, but good for the Cardinals. I think Cliff Kingsbury is proving to be a better NFL coach than a college coach, because I think because here's the thing. I think the reason why I think that Cliff Kingsbury is a better NFL coach than a college coach is that in college they expect you to, if you're anything, they expect you to win 10 games in a row. No, no, I do not. I will not buy followers. But anyway, they're a young team. Again, back to the reason why I think Cliff Kingsbury is more suited for the NFL is because in college they expect you to, if you're anything as a coach, they expect you to eventually start winning more. Like 10-1 or 9-3. But Texas Tech is not really that school. They're not. They've had their years in the past, they're an average team. They're not recruiting wise. They're not the top school in their state. That's Texas, and and I think the pressure of winning all those games in the NFL is not there, because yes, you do want to win and make sure you're in a good spot for the playoffs, but one loss doesn't but one or two losses doesn't hurt your season, because the difference between the college because the difference between college football and the NFL is that the NFL playoffs are purely statistical. You know, it's all based on records and stats and tiebreakers, and it's all a formula. Like if you win your division, you're in the playoffs. If you have the best record in the conference, you know, if you have the best record in the conference, you usually get the NFC. You usually get the number one seed, unless one of those other teams has the same. Unless you tie with one team who has the same record with you, and they happen to have a tiebreaker over you, because maybe they beat a team that you lost to in the season, or they were one of the teams that you lost to in the earlier. But it's pure. But one or two losses or six losses doesn't make or break a season. It can, because of the wild card situation. But there's a lot. But there's more. But there's time. But there's a little less stress there. You know. Um, because in the NFL, it's all about when you round into shape. Like teams want to it's good and all to start out the season really well, but it's all about how you finish the season in December, because you want to be playing your best ball right around December. That's kind of that's what I've heard from experts, and that's what the and that's true, because a lot of times the teams that have that are playing their best at the end of the season, those are usually the teams that make the Super Bowl, or have a deep playoff run, unless you're the Dallas Cowboys. The next, but I still think the Cardinals are still a ways away. Maybe one or two pieces left to fill in on offense. Maybe another receiver to pair with DeAndre Hopkins, and then potentially you move for a running back, or perhaps, and then also on defense, maybe you shore up a couple of those spots. Get more depth for the number twos and whatnot, because and I think year one. I think year two was a good. I think year two was a step in the right direction for the Cardinals, and we'll see. We'll have to see what year three brings. The next team in the division, the last team in the division, was the 49ers. I'm just gonna say now. I think the 49ers this year were just a victim of the injury bug. They had Nick Bosa this year, and he goes down, with an injury, and and they just start losing people left and right on the offensive side and defensive side, and and they start to lose that depth, and they looked just like they did at the beginning of the season last year. They looked really dominant to start off the season. They did lose to the Cardinals, but they did. But they looked just like their regular selves, 31, because they handled their business versus the Jets and Giants. Both teams aren't very good, so you handle. So if you're a good team, you handle your business in that situation, and they did. But they were still but there were still a lot of injuries, and right around the time that they reached Philadelphia, that's when the brakes really started to fall off, because they lost to the Philadelphia Eagles 25-20. Then they get drilled by the Miami Dolphins 43-17. And at this point, you're starting to wonder if Jimmy Garoppolo is really the quarterback of the future for the 49ers. And I think last year, Jimmy Garoppolo played good in large part because they had a running game. They had a powerful defense. Their defense stayed relatively healthy all of last year, and their receiver and they had a consistent amount of receivers last year that stayed healthy, and because they especially after they brought in Emmanuel Sanders, he was a really good addition. But this year, Jimmy Garoppolo was really struggling even in the, and then what made it worse was that when he went down and Nick Mullins came in his place, and Nick Mullins actually looked really good, actually played really well, in place, and he actually looked like the 49ers, or Nick Mullins was a better fit for the offense, and I think number one, I think the 49ers were just a victim of the MG bug, and number two, inconsistent quarterback play. I think the 49ers still have a really good thing going on. We'll have to see. It's unfortunate what happened to them this year because, and 6-10. I think 6-10 is a good record for the kind of season that they had. I would say that they were probably one of the most. I would say that they were probably the unluckiest team of the year, in my opinion, because they're fresh off a Super Bowl appearance, and they drafted Nick Young or Nick Bosa out of Ohio State. They've got all these deep number one picks on defense, and it's just unfortunate that they had to that the injury bug got them. Because I think they're better than they're better than their record says they are, and they did what they could. Because I think if the 49ers are healthy, fully healthy, I don't think they lose to Dallas or Washington. I don't think they do that. Because I think a healthy San Francisco 49ers I think a fully loaded San Francisco 49ers team is a lot better than the Dallas Cowboys, even with Dak Prescott. Even if Dak Prescott was healthy. I don't know if a fully loaded 49ers team would have beaten the Bills. Perhaps they would have, but yes, if they were fully loaded and mostly healthy, I think they would have made the playoffs this year had they not gotten injured. The next division in the NFC, and I started with the NFC West because I wanted to talk about the Seahawks and get to it before I forget. The next division, and we'll save the NFC East for last because I have a lot to say about the NFC East. The next division is the NFC North. You had Green Bay in the division win it. They went 13-3. Then you had Chicago go 8-8. You had Minnesota go to 7-9, and then Detroit Lions go 5-11. The Green Bay Packers. It's really sad that the Green Bay Packers lost because I'm rooting for Aaron Rodgers to get at least one more Super Bowl before he retires. But for whatever reason he can't seem to get over the hump, and maybe and sometimes I feel like that's the defense letting him down. But the Green Bay Packers definitely made a lot of strides forward this year. I think they found some good weapons on offense this year, especially Valdez-Scantling, and then what's his name? Marquez Valdez-Scantling. And obviously Devontae Adams was a stud this year for them. Alan Lazard was a really good find for them. Um, I hope Aaron Rodgers stays put because maybe they get some more receivers, or you know they or you know they make some moves on defense, because I think they need to shore up the defense a little bit more, because it obviously let Aaron Rodgers down in a couple of key spots, you know, um, especially against the Buccaneers. And I know it's Tom Brady, but I, but it's not a good look to give up 31 to give up 38 to the Bucs and then 31 against the Bucs in the division in the AFC in the NFC Championship. I don't think that's a good look. You know, especially and I think 30-3 is a good record this year. It was number one. It was the number. It got them the number one seed. But I hope Aaron Rodgers stays put, because maybe next year they can make it. Hopefully. But it was just unfortunate. The next team in the division was the Chicago Bears. It was year one with Nick Foles as their quarterback. You know, it's really unfortunate because it's really weird because they started out with Trubisky in the year, and they were pretty good. They were 3-0, and then they decided to put in Nick Foles because Trubisky was turning the ball over, and Nick Foles didn't look any better than Trubisky, and then Trubisky got the start again, and then Trubisky eventually got his starting job back, and then he looked pretty solid to end the year because they went, they won because they started out the year because Chicago started out. Where did Nick Foles' first game? Because Nick Foles' first game was against Panthers, so Trubisky went. So Trubisky started out the year 4-1. Playing pretty well, but not the best. And they were kind of. They started out hot and then they started losing because they didn't have any offense. They couldn't score any. They couldn't score at all. Nick Foles wasn't playing well. And it's and then they get their, and then the Bears get their, and then the Bears insert Mitchell Trubisky again into the offense, and they finish the year off. And they finish the year off 3-0 after the 3-2 with it, and they ended their year with a 3-game win streak. They started out with the Houston Texans, and then before they reached Green Bay, but he was 3-0, but he gets the starting job back, and he goes 3-3. He goes on a 3-game win streak, blowing out the Texans, beating the Vikings, and then blowing out the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I think that I personally believe Trubisky is a good enough quarterback, except that you got to give him the right kind of design, the right kind of game plan for him. Use his legs a little bit more. I think a better head coach would do wonders for them. I think Matt Nagy gets in his way a little bit too much. He gets in his own way a little bit. They definitely have the pieces. It's just that Matt Nagy struggles to get. It's just that the consistency on offense is not there. And we'll have to see. We'll have to see what they do at quarterback. Like, did Mitchell Trubisky save his job this year because he had a better rating record than Nick Foles did when Nick Foles was the starting quarterback. You know, and we'll see though. We'll, who knows though. The next team is the Lions, the next team in the division was the Vikings, who went 7-9. They were they were a disappointing team. They were a typical Vikings. This is a typical Vikings team, They do have a good. They did find a nice receiver in Justin Jefferson, I think, to pair with Adam Thielen. I think they have a really good receiving core. Especially with Kyle Rudolph at tight end, and then so I definitely do think they have a really good receiving core packed with a really good running back core. It's just that they're not consistent enough on defense. Mike Zimmer is supposed to be a defensive genius, but too often in the games where they need the defense to play their best, they let their team down a lot. Um, like for example, against the Dallas Cowboys, there's no way the Vikings should have lost to the Dallas Cowboys. No way. But I guess it's the Vikings, and you can't. And I guess I don't know. I don't really have too much expectations for the Vikings. They're kind of, sometimes they get hot and they make the playoffs, and you're like, okay, and they're like, oh, and then you get scared of them, and you're like, oh man, maybe they could beat. Nope, no, they cannot. No, they cannot. Um, I, who knows about Kirk Cousins? Also, I think right now they're just kind of waiting out his contract because they paid him a lot of money. I think as soon as his contract is up, I think they'll definitely look for a different quarterback when his contract's up, because I don't think he's the right guy for him. He's too unpredictable. He plays good. He plays good in spots as well, but then he has a game or two where he's like, why is he the start? Why is he the starter? And and that's kind of the Vikings as a whole. The next team is the Detroit Lions. I'll be honest, I didn't watch many Detroit Lions games because they're not worth watching. Um, I definitely do think it's a time for a restart, though. Good on them for firing Matt Patricia. He tried to be Bill Belichick when he's not. He most his mannerisms. You would have thought that was Bill Belichick there, but except you weren't winning. And and I I hope Matthew Stafford finds success elsewhere after this trade when he gets traded. It looks like he's gonna go to the. Looks like right now he's gonna go to the Indianapolis Colts. That's what the trade talks are. So the trade rumors are. But I hopefully the new head coach can install a little bit of can change around the culture there, because really since Barry Sanders the Lions have not had much, and the times that they have when they had Calvin Johnson and Matthew Stafford, the one head coach that they actually were winning with, Jim Caldwell, they fired because they weren't getting anywhere. Well, you guys made the playoffs though. That's more success than you've had in years. And you fire the one guy that got you to the playoffs. And you're not a franchise that's won much anyway. So it's kind of unfortunate in that regard. they just got a lot of work to do. Um, who knows who their quarterback will be next year? We'll have to see. I didn't pay attention. I didn't pay too much attention to the Lions this year. I'm sure you didn't either, unless you're a Lions fan. Um, but yeah, that's all I have to say about the Lions. The next division is the NFC South. The South has the New Orleans Saints, who went 12-4, who finished first. You have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who went 11-5, finished second. You had the Carolina Panthers, who went 5-11, who finished third, and then you had the Atlanta Falcons go 4-12 and finish last in the division. The New Orleans Saints are always a disappointment in the playoffs. They always it always looks like they're finding their mojo right when they need it the most. But I think Drew Brees' age really got to them this year. He goes down with an injury, with a rib injury, and Teddy Bridgewater play in a and they play in a and they play pretty well in his absence, but he comes back and he doesn't really look the same. He doesn't really quite look the same. And it takes him a while to find his mojo again. And then Michael Thomas, they didn't really have him at all this year. Until he came back, and it finally seemed like they started to find their mojo, especially since they swept the Buccaneers. Let's see the schedule here. They start the year. The Saints start out the year with a victory over the Buccaneers. Load up here. They start out the year with a 34-23 victory over the Buccaneers, and then they lose two straight to the Raiders and Packers, and then they go on a 2-game win streak, beating the Detroit Lions and LA Chargers, and they started out their season 3-2, and then after their bye they go on after the bye they finish with a and then after their bye week they finish with a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-2 record to finish the year, and they really looked like they were finally starting to find their groove. They blew out the Buccaneers. They handled their business there. They did their business. They handled their business, and then they reached Philadelphia and they lost. And they inexplicably lost a game to the Eagles. And at this point, the NFC East was kind of starting to round into something. They're finally starting to round into a viable division, but the NFC East was still really bad this year. And it's unfortunate that Drew Brees could not make another Super Bowl, just like Aaron Rodgers. I still think he's a Hall of Famer. It's just that he probably. It's just that it's just unfortunate because a couple of years they didn't have the best defense, and then they finally found a defense, and they still couldn't. And they still couldn't make it. They've had the Minnesota Miracle, then the no pass interference call versus the Rams. 2 years in a row of not. 2 years in a row of getting robbed, and then did the people complain in the Eagles when they lost to the Eagles as well? I can't remember, but year after year of heartbreak. Good on Drew Brees for for at least getting them to a Super Bowl. He did a lot for the Saints. The Saints historically were a really bad team. They were average, but they but but in the 80s they would wear bags over their heads because they were so bad. They they would call themselves the Aints. You know, um, so good on them for so good on Drew Brees for his career. He will be missed. He's one of my favorite players of all time. Um, you know, it's just unfortunate. It's unfortunate. Um, I think I think I think they'll still be good next year. It's just that we'll have to see who the quarterback is. Um, maybe a new quarterback will provide some more success, but who knows? Um, the next team in the division was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who went 11-5, finished second, as I said before. This was the first year with Tom Brady as their quarterback, with Rob Gronkowski and Antonio Brown, and as the receiver, adding to an already stacked receiving corps with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And they added Leonard Fournette later in the year, earlier in the season, and it was a weird season for them. And they're one of the Super Bowl representatives, and they are the NFC representatives this year. The Buccaneers were a weird team in the sense that you never knew what kind of defense that their team was going to get. They always had a great defense on paper, but you saw a lot of times it was like, what defense were you going to get? Because they stunk up the joint versus the Saints in Chicago. They lose to the Rams, they lose to the Kansas City Chiefs, and they start out the year. All their losses, by the way, it's pretty weird. All of their losses came before the bye. So they went into their bye. What was it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They went into their bye 7-5, and they won the rest of the way. They won the rest of their games after the bye. They went on they won versus they beat Minnesota, Atlanta twice, and Detroit Lions once to end the year, and they were red hot at this point. But you never really knew what kind of defense they were going to get. Most of the time, they did handle their business. It's just that in games versus the Giants, it was a close game. They lost to the Bears. They could have very well lost to the Chargers had the Chargers been more experienced and knew how to win, because the Chargers were up. What was it? The Chargers were up. Chargers were up 24-7 on the Buccaneers at one point, and the Buccaneers came all the way back and beat them. So, and that's kind of the questions that I had with the Buccaneers going into the playoffs, especially against the good teams. Like, what kind of defense will the Buccaneers get, against the Packers? And I guess you don't. I guess that's why you don't ever count. I guess that's why you don't ever bet against Tom Brady, which I've made the mistake in the past, as I've said before in last episode. You should never bet against Tom Brady ever. And they look dominant in most games, but there are games where you were like, huh, and where you kind of questioned them, especially against the Saints, because they ran into the Saints twice in that regular season and lost both times, and it was unfortunate. But credit to them for staying with it and reaching the Super Bowl. The next team in the division is the Carolina Panthers. Didn't watch much Carolina Panthers football. They're a team they are a team right now that's rebuilding. They are a young team. They have Christian McCaffrey, who's struggling to stay healthy now. Hopefully he can stay healthy because he's arguably one of their best players. They started off with a 0-2 record, and then they won 3 in a row, and it's kind of like, okay, they're starting to turn it around a little bit. But then they go on this 5-game losing streak, and at this point, and they go into their bye, 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They go into their bye 4 and 8, and by this point they're dead in the water, no playoffs, and they get their 5th win against the Washington football team later in the year. But they didn't really. I guess the one game that they did play well in against the good teams was the Chiefs game. It was against the Chiefs and against the Saints. But other than that, they really didn't do much. After that, they lost to the Broncos, which shouldn't happen. It's just unfortunate. I think they're still they're a team on the rise still. They still got to work out their defense and their offense. I know Luke Kuechly's been retired for a couple years now, but that's still a big loss for them. I think they're still feeling the effects of that, and now they're still trying to figure that out. Who can be that next linebacker for them. Who's going to be their quarterback? I don't know. Maybe will they stick with Teddy Bridgewater? Who knows? But if he starts playing, but if he was a little bit inconsistent this year also. So who knows? Maybe we'll see though. They did add Robbie Anderson this year, who came from the Jets, but it didn't appear like he did anything. He did much either. I could be wrong though. Yeah, Robbie Anderson. Oh, sorry. Oh, Robbie Anderson he was a good addition for them actually, but we'll see how he develops. We'll see how the team develops next year. So yeah, the next and last team in the division was the Falcons, and boy, were they choke jobs this year. Big lead after big lead evaporated. Blown leads after blown leads, and it eventually cost Dan Quinn his job. You feel for players like Julio Jones and Matt Ryan because they always have a good offense. It's just that for whatever reason they just can't hold the leads. For whatever reason, and we originally thought it was Kyle Shanahan for not running the ball or in the Super Bowl, but I guess it's just a meme now that when the Falcons are up big, you can't expect them to hold it, and I didn't in the Cowboys, and anytime especially at the Cowboys game, anytime the Falcons got a big lead, I was like, they're gonna lose again, and it was horrible, and they eventually did. They did have the one solace they did have was they did beat the brakes out the Raiders. That was the one good thing they did. They did hold on to the lead versus the Vikings, but that was about it. It was just unfortunate. They blew a huge lead to the Cowboys. They blew a huge lead to the Bears. They blew a huge lead. They blow a huge lead to the Buccaneers, and it was just horrible, and it was unfortunate to watch, You know, I hope it would be great to see them next year stay put. But obviously they gotta fix their defense because obviously they need to find a coach that won't allow a letdown to happen. Um, too often, what happens when you have big leads is that the players can, at halftime, they can get complacent, and I think that's one of the areas that Dan Quinn struggled with was complacency, because as a coach that you gotta, as a team you gotta keep your foot on the gas. Don't let them don't give them anything, because if they start scoring, it's hard to stop when they start scoring when you're in such a big lead, because feels like it feels like the world's falling out and falling apart, and you start tensing when they come back, especially when they get close and they had another touchdown, and you're like, uh-oh. And so you gotta coach for complacency. You gotta find a coach that's good with complacency, that that that's good at dealing with complacency. That's the one thing that I think that Falcons struggle with, is complacency. They get a big lead and then they lose it. And I guess that happens sometimes in the league. And hold on, I'm trying to find my thing of. Oh, and I'll be right back. And that's what I feel like the Falcons got to do. Got to find a guy that won't that can defend against complacency. Now the last division in the league is the NFC East, and I decided to save them for last because this one's going to be fun. This was a bad league. This was a bad division this year. So it's been bad for the last few years, but like nicknames like NFC Least. Um, it was fun watching Skip Bayless and try and defend his Cowboys, and you know it's fun. It's fun for once seeing them agree on things regarding the Cowboys. You know, and the someone had to win it, right? the NFC East obviously has the Washington football team who ditched their name who ditched their name. They have the New York Giants, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Philadelphia Eagles. Who knew that the Washington football team would win this division? I'm sure not many. Yes, they did have the saving grace was that Washington had the best defense in the division because they had 3 number 1 picks at the defensive line, and they had a solid defense overall. And they didn't have much offense until they found Antonio Gibson, who I thought was a pretty good back for them. Alex Smith at quarterback, he played really well. He comeback player of the year. I would vote for him. I thought he was comeback player of the year. Comeback player of the year, especially after the injury, and someone had to win. And the Washington football team actually looked like a solid team at the end of the year because they started winning. Let's see what was this good. Let's see here. Let's see they go into their bye week 2-5, right? And they start and after their bye week they go 5-5. They go 5-5. So 2-5 to start the year and 5-5 to end. Or no, hold on, sorry. And 5-4 to end the year. And one of their wins, they started to win. They started to show some life right around the Giants and versus the Lions, and they eventually beat and where they really started to show signs of life was against the Bengals, and then they beat the brakes off of the Cowboys Thanksgiving Day, which was fun to watch. And then you obviously had and then they beat the Steelers, and then they beat the Niners, and they barely lost. They should have beaten I felt they should have beaten the Seahawks. They were good enough to do it, but Seattle again was not looking very good, and I was like, here we go again, because it's another NFC East team that we're not playing well against, and they actually started to look like a pretty solid team. I'm actually excited for them next year. Especially if the defense stays the way it is. We'll have to see what they do at quarterback, because I don't think Alex Smith is the long-term solution. But I do think they have a good start. They'll probably look. They found some hidden gems at receiver. They found some hidden gems at receiver, obviously, this year. Out of Terry McLaurin, he was a breakout star this year. But other than that, they had a pretty good season. Didn't look too good at the beginning of the year, and then the rest of the division was kind of lackluster. The Giants, you knew were going to be bad, except that they started to play some football at the end of the year. They had a chance to win the NFC East until the Eagles decided to lose. It was a bad division, The Cowboys were again a disappointment. What can go wrong will go wrong. That's Stephen A's catchphrase. That's Stephen A's phrase when talking about the Cowboys. That's one of his That's one of his main points. Is like what can go wrong will go wrong. You want you know Dak Prescott goes down unfortunately, and I hope he's all right. And Mike McCarthy, I it's curious to see because I don't know where people, I don't know why Skip thought Mike McCarthy would be a good coach for the Cowboys because other than that Super Bowl year, the defenses that McCarthy had were really bad, and the saving grace for Mike McCarthy in Green Bay was that he had two Hall of Fame quarterbacks. He had Brett Favre for a couple of years, and then Aaron Rodgers and then Aaron Rodgers for to end his tenure as the Green Bay's head coach, and both of those quarterbacks are Hall of Famers. You know, um, it's just unfortunate because I mean it's good, it's fun to watch them argue whose fault it was, and whoever thought it was a good idea to bring Mike Smith in for your um, defensive coordinator, given how bad his defenses were when he was in Atlanta. Um, but they got a lot of holes. As long as I think as long as Jerry Jones' ego gets in the way, ego is still in charge. They won't win at all. They'll still be because they gotta find a coach because Mike McCarthy's obviously not the right coach. He's a little bit better than Jason Garrett, but not by much. He's still because a lot of the players are still there, and and they prove, and the Cowboys prove year in and year out that talent alone does not win you championships. It's the it's the coaching. It's everything that has to do with it that wins, and that's the one ingredient that the Cowboys do not have. It's they have talent, yes, but they do not have any sort of but they don't have any will. Dak Prescott's got will. He's the only person that seems to he's the only one that seems to possess that on the Cowboys. And maybe CeeDee Lamb, but that's about it. Obviously the Giants went 6-10, and the Eagles finished with a whopping. And the Eagles finished with a whopping 4-11-1. They had questions all over. Doug Peterson kind of dug his own grave by deciding to go with Nate Sudfeld at quarterback. Carson Wentz is widely inconsistent. They were also a team that was injured, that had a lot of injuries, but it didn't help. But it didn't help them at all. They were a bad football team, and in my opinion, I think if a division is so bad, I think that's the one thing that the NFL could do is like if a division is so bad, like they don't have to be the division winners. I guess that factors into the math though, but I mean, like at least the Washington Redskins. At least the Washington football team looked like a team at the end of the year, but it's just wildly inconsistent, and who knows what the Giants will do. I don't know if Joe Judge is the right guy. We'll see year 2 with him. He's got to start. Daniel Jones has got to stop turning the ball over. We got to see what Saquon Barkley's health is like. Because if he can't, because it looks like it's not looking good for his career. He's already been injured twice. He's only played one full season. He hasn't played a full season yet, I don't think, right? He hasn't played a full season, am I right? Am I right on that? Well, he played 16 games in 2018. That was the only time, but then but he only played 2 games this year, and he got injured 1 game, and he got injured in 2019. So he hasn't exactly, you know, been been able to stay healthy, and maybe that's a large part because of the Giants, how bad the talent on the skill on the Giants, but hopefully he can stay healthy, and yeah, that's the NFC East for you, and it showed that division was so bad, you know, and it was really nice to see them actually have some success, and it was and at least it kind of rounded into a division at the end, except for the Eagles and Giants and Cowboys, but because they're looking competitive, but it wasn't, but it was by no means much better. Um, that is it for my podcast today. Again, you are watching this on twitch.tv/Diego100. If you liked what you saw today, be sure to leave a like. Be sure to follow if you're watching this on Twitch. This video will be uploaded to my YouTube channel called Hess Sports. If you travel on over there, make sure to or consider leaving a like and subscribing for more of this. We'll have to see when I can do the show next because I have to write the next episode. But yeah, this was a year in review, episode 3 of my podcast. Again, my name is Adam Hess, and this is Hess Sports Podcast, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.